StrayAllDay.com.
You're now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative, which is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques all underneath the umbrella of one unified philosophy that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is why people tend to lose their damn minds when the subject of former president, at least as of this recording, Donald Trump, is the topic. That's the topic. That's a long title, but I'll shorten it up for when we put this out. Why people lose their minds over the subject of Donald Trump. But before we get into this, I remind you all of two things. First of all, my daily motivation and Monday motivation messages guaranteed to have you focused, sharp, and on point for you to start your day or your week, respectively. All you got to do to receive those is be part of my texting community, which is free to join. Just text the following number, 305-384-6894. And once we start sending those messages out again, you'll be getting those straight to your phone. If you send a text right now, we got it. If you don't get a response, it's because we haven't reactivated sending the messages. But once we do, you'll be getting a response from our bot, and it'll be letting you know it's coming, and then it'll be coming straight from me. Secondly, Work on Your Game University. That's the place where I do all of my coaching. If you'd like to have me as your direct coach, that is the only way that it happens. We're looking for a certain type of individual. This is not for everybody. This is for the top level performers out there, top 2% performers, those of you who are at that level, or those of you who are seeking to get that level and you're serious about getting there. You're not just interested, but you are serious. You're ambitious about doing it. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. With that out the way, let's get into the topic here today, which is, again, why people lose their damn minds over Trump. This topic should not be news or a surprise to you. I mean, the topic itself, maybe it might be news or surprise that I'm talking about it, but the fact that it's true shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, as you either see people who have lost their minds over Trump, or you are guilty of losing your mind over Trump, or one or the other. Whether it is something that he allegedly did or said, whether it is something that you believe that he represents or someone else believes he represents, maybe something that was told to the person who's lost their minds about him, something that you heard, something that you read, whatever it is, or something else, or a combination of all of the above. All of these lead to people losing their minds over this guy. And today I will, as objectively as humanly possible, explain to you why people tend to become unhinged when Trump is the subject, and specifically the people who become most unhinged about him are those who are against him. And there's a reason for that, because people tend to get more activated, for lack of a better term, when you're going against something, when it's something that you don't want, than it's something that you do want. In other words, people will fight harder to stop themselves from losing $10 than they will fight to make $10. We tend to fight harder when we go against something that we hate than when we are going for something that we want. This is just normal. This is just normal human nature. All right. So this is not about Donald Trump himself. That's about anything. So, and I'm going to share this again. What I'm going to share here today has no bearing on whether you are a fan, whether you are a supporter, whether you are a hater, whether you are voting for him or you are not voting for him, whether you did in the past but you're not this time, whether you did not in the past but you're going to this time. Whatever. By the time this episode comes out, it'll be before the 2024 election has taken place. And again, I'm going to do this as objectively as humanly possible. It does not matter what side of the fence you are on him, or whether you're not on the side at all. What I found is almost everybody's on the side, which is why I'm doing this subject. Point number one, topic once again, is why people lose their damn minds over Donald Trump. Number one, Donald Trump does not follow rules or conventions, and he has literally made a career out of not following rules and conventions. This is one of the reasons that people lose their mind over him. Let me explain to you what I mean by that and why this matters. The reason this matters is because most people spend their entire lives following rules, doing what they're told, and climbing ladders one step at a time. This is how most people live their lives. Following rules, climbing ladders, and doing what they're told one step at a time. Now, is this a bad thing? No. Is it a good thing? No. Is this a thing? And I talked about this in a few episodes of my show. I talked about it in episode 2874, where I talked about triggering the phenomenon, in that you have to look for ways to skip steps. You have to look for ways to basically skip the line and jump ahead of things. There are times in life when you don't want to skip steps. I talked about that in episode 1356, where I said, stop trying to skip steps. But there are also times in life when you want to take the express lane. All All right, where you want to take the faster route to get to the success that you want to get to. Talked about this in episode 2483, how to get to your goals faster. Episode number 2778, the 3 levels of speed and fast. So there are times when you want to skip steps. There are times when you don't want to skip steps. The point is, when you're a person who has consistently followed all the steps that you are told to follow, and that's the way you have lived your life, when you see someone who is not doing that and they're doing it successfully, well, the first thing it does is make you start questioning yourself. And when you see that, and you see someone else is not following the same steps that you're following, and they've gotten ahead of you without following all the steps that you have, the first thing you do is question yourself, well, what the hell is wrong with me? Most human beings are not willing to have that conversation honestly and say, well, okay, here are the mistakes that I made, and that's how I ended up here, and this person ended up there. Instead, what people do is they rationalize the situation by coming up with something negative to say about the person who skipped steps, rather than saying something about yourself and holding yourself accountable to, hey, maybe I need to look at that formula, or maybe I just need to put the foot on my foot, press it harder on the gas on the formula that I'm following, and maybe that'll make it make sense. But most people don't do that. Donald Trump, for example, whether in business or in politics, did not follow the normal process. And not only did he not follow the normal process to create success for himself, and whether you want to, sometimes anytime I mention Trump and success, especially publicly, there's always a good amount of people who push back and say, well, he's had this and this, and he had this many, bankruptcies, and these businesses failed, and this ended up being a scam. Or people start to point out all these things that he did in business that did not work. Well, what about the things he did that did work? Because if you want to point out all the things that a person had in business not work, then you also got to point out the things that did work. And he's had more things that did work than most of his detractors have had that did work. So you got to balance those both out. If you're only going to point out the negatives about him, then we got to balance that out or point out the things that he's done successfully in business, because that's why we know his name. We know his name because of what he did in business. We don't know his name for anything else. So if you want to point out his failures, you also have to point out his successes. And then if you're going to point out if you want to say, well, his failures drown out his successes, okay, then we got to hold that same mirror up to you. All right, how many successes do you have to measure up to his? How many failures do you have to measure up to his? And at that point, the conversation pretty much ends. That's what, in my experience. So in Donald Trump, in business or in politics, he did not follow the normal process, and he has made a show out of not following the process. That's the part that really bothers people, because if he was doing it quietly and humbly, then most people would not care, and therefore I probably would not be using him as an example in this episode. I wouldn't be using him as the subject of this episode today. But because everyone has seen him, because he himself has made a spectacle of himself and how he is doing things, everyone sees him, everyone knows who he is, and everyone has an opinion. In the business world, Donald Trump got a head start. The luck was that he was born into a family of an entrepreneur. His father was a real estate developer. But even then, Donald Trump's father was not famous. He was not world famous to where everyone knows who he is, the way that Donald Trump was even before he got into politics. Before he joined politics, everybody knew who Donald Trump was. Maybe you didn't have a strong opinion, but if I said the name, everyone knew who he was, right? Worldwide, even if you're not in the real estate industry. Donald Trump's dad was known in New York in real estate. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know who Donald Trump's dad was because I'm not from New York and I'm not in real estate. I had no idea that the guy existed. But I do know that Donald Trump, the one we know now, we know that guy existed. It wasn't Donald Trump's. His dad was named Fred. So it was Donald Trump was the first. His son is the junior, the guy who's still out. But anyway, Trump was able to jump ahead of everyone in the real estate business, not just because his dad put him into the business, but because Donald Trump was willing to do things that most people were not willing to do. Donald Trump did things his dad didn't even do, such as Donald Trump invested in New York City as a real estate developer when New York City was not New York City. Any of you who's old enough to know this knows. Any of you who's from New York, you should know. You should know the history of the town that you're in. New York City in the 80s and the 90s, early 90s, was not a place that you wanted to go on vacation. It was not a place you walked around and took pictures of yourself. It was not that. It's that now. It was not that then. And Donald Trump invested. He put his name, his reputation, and his money on the line, and he was able to work out some really great deals to where he didn't have to always use money, which is smart business, by the way. That is not a red mark on him. That's actually smart business. If you can start a business without having to put any of your own money down, any business person should do that. And he was able to do it many times. He wrote about it in his books. If you haven't read his books, you should. If you're going to say negative things about him, you should at least let him say what he has to say for himself and read it through his books. But anyway, he talks about it in his books, how he was able to do a lot of real estate deals without having to use any of his own money. Again, as I said, it's smart. And he invested in New York City when nobody wanted to invest in New York City. New York City was not it was not a pleasant place to be. It wasn't a place you walked around as a tourist. And he put that stuff on the line to invest in New York, and it paid off for him. I mean, look at New York City now. He is part of the reason that the New York City skyline is the New York City skyline. Whether you like him or not, nobody can deny that. Many of his buildings were called Trump. He just called them Trump buildings. And many of them are just, or they're noted for their addresses. They don't even have any official name other than that, Trump, or the address of where they're at, mostly because of who he is. All right, they're known because of who he is. Most people in real estate were not willing, and still to this day are not willing, to be as brash as he was and is. And in politics, is the exact same thing. He had very little political experience, or we could actually say zero political experience, when Donald Trump decided to become the politician and jump straight to running for president. He didn't do any community service act jobs. He wasn't a city councilman. He didn't serve in the Senate or in the House of Representatives. He was not a vice president. He did not become a judge. I don't believe he has a law degree. He went straight to running for president. He went straight for the biggest job in America from zero. All right, you want to talk about brash? There it is. All right, you want to talk about having balls? There it is. He went straight to running for president and leveraged the fact that he was not a lifetime politician. He leveraged that as a strong point rather than a minus. He didn't apologize for the fact that he didn't have political experience. He said, when people point out he didn't have political experience, he said, exactly. All right, look at what people with political experience have done to you up to this point. He used it against them rather than them using it as a weak point against him. And in short, he took the very thing that most people would have seen as a reason to stay out of the game. Most of you listening to this who don't have political experience, if I asked you, would you jump straight to running for president? Most of you would say, well, no, I don't have the experience. I haven't done anything politically to jump into running for president. Donald Trump said, I haven't done anything politically to run for president. That's exactly why I should do it. This is exactly what I mean. He took what most people would say is a reason to do nothing, and he used it as the reason to do something, and then leveraged it to succeed at doing that something. This is what most people don't do. And when most people see other people doing this, instead of looking at themselves and saying, what can I learn from that? Instead, they say, what's wrong with that person? And they come up with more reasons to dislike that individual. And Donald Trump makes himself a perfect target for this. So, and it worked, as we all know. Again, whether he wins or loses the upcoming election, the fact that he got to the point of winning the Republican ticket, 3 times, and winning the election at least one time, we don't know what's going to happen in 2024's election as of this recording, is a success. The fact that he even got there, the fact that he even made his name known for that, it worked. And the reason why this bothers people, as I said, most people spend their lives following the rules, climbing the ladder. He didn't do that. He did it successfully. That disturbs people. And most people would never admit that. Instead, they mask that, what would be them checking themselves, they mask that by just projecting that energy onto the target, the subject, which happens to be Donald Trump. Point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is why people lose their damn minds over Donald Trump. Number 2, he is a salesman who speaks directionally and not literally. Now, you need to understand very clearly what I mean by this, because these are 2 different ways of speaking, or 2 different ways of speaking and being understood. Remember that communication skills are a force multiplier, is one of the most valuable tools you can develop. And you need to understand this when you're listening to other people talk, and also when you are noticing how other people are receiving what you said. So getting more direct about Trump's behavior here. Some people become unhinged about him because he says things that people look at exactly what he said. Like, look at what he said. All right, this is a fact. He said this. They quote him, right? And they quote him on things in which he is speaking directionally and not literally. And then people use what he has said directionally and try to interpret it literally and say, well, he said this, where we're having 2 different conversations. So I talk about this in every conversation, all the conversations we've had here when I talk about communication. Understand something. When you like a person and you have compassion and empathy for them and you are trying to get on the same page with them, you understand that person in a directional sense. Meaning, you take the words that they say literally, you interpret the meaning, what they are trying to say, even if they are not that good at saying it, and you give them the benefit of the doubt of the direction of where they're trying to go, rather than prosecuting them based on the letter of their words. That's what you do when you like somebody. That's what you do when you're on the same page with someone, when you're eye to eye with them and you want to get along with them. That's what you do with people. All of you do it, even if you don't realize that you're doing it. When, on the other hand, you dislike a person and you want to make them look bad and you're looking for reasons to verify and confirm why you don't like them in your own mind, you interpret every word that they say literally. So basically, you prosecute them and you take the letter of the law of every word that they say and you attack them on every single detail of what they said, and in a gambit to prove yourself correct and to prove them wrong. People do this all the time. You want to see an example of people doing this, just go on social media and look in the comments on anything that someone posts where they're talking about some social current event topic. And at some point, you'll run into a thread of some people going back and forth, and they're just trying to be right by the letter. They're trying to be right by the detail. All right, that's trying to be right as opposed to looking to get on the same page. That's what many people do it these days all the time. And again, they usually do it when they disagree with the point being made. So they try to find a detail to be right about rather than understanding the general point of what's being said, whether they agree with it or not. Donald Trump does this. Donald Trump brings this out of people all day, every day. He's bringing it out of people without even knowing that he's doing it. And the point is, people become unhinged about him because, again, they're taking what he says literally as opposed to directionally. So let me give you a few examples. During Trump's first presidential campaign, he vouched that he would build a wall. Everybody remembers the whole build a wall thing, right? Trump was talking about building a wall along the southern border of the United States because he went on and on for, this is a key point of his campaign, about letting Americans know that there were a bunch of illegal immigrants coming into the United States. He was not lying. There were a bunch of illegal immigrants coming to the United States. He's still not lying if he said it today, because there still are a bunch of illegal immigrants coming into the United States, and the current administration is allowing it to happen. That's not, that's literally happening. All right. Most of you know that that's happening, that there are illegals coming into this country, whether you are an immigrant yourself or not. All right. The fact that there are illegal immigrants coming into this country is true. And to come into this country illegally makes you illegal. All right. That makes you illegal, and you should be removed from this country, period. And again, even if you listening to this is an immigrant, even if your family are immigrants, are you all here illegally? Okay, fine. If you're here illegally, you shouldn't be here, period. All right, you could be a fan of my show. I could have met you and shook your hand. If you are here illegally, you should not be in the country. We have laws for this, and these laws need to be enforced. But without law, there is no order. And Trump vouched, anyway, getting back to my point, that he would build a wall to keep these illegal immigrants out of the United States. He said a whole lot of things around that, but he mentioned this whole build a wall thing. Now, many people took that literally, even after he won, and they would try to push back against him and say, well, he said he would build a wall. He didn't build the wall. He didn't complete the wall. Now, they did actually start building a wall. And I don't believe, and this is the point that I want you to get, and I'm challenging this point of, oh, he didn't build a wall. He's talking about building a wall. We don't need to build a wall, et cetera, et cetera. When Trump said build a wall, what he was speaking about was directional, not literal. Now, yes, some wall did get built, but he was speaking more in a directional sense than a literal sense. I'm going to help you all understand this. And this is good. Excuse me. If any of you wants to understand persuasion, you want to understand sales, understand what I'm about to explain to you. He was giving you, when he said build a wall, he was not telling voters that we are literally going to build brick by brick a Great Wall of China along the southern border of the United States, because most people who are voting for him don't live in the state of Texas or Arizona or California, or I believe is one other state that touches the southern border there. Most people who are voting for him don't live in those areas near the border, so they really don't care. And if there's a wall there, they will never see it because they will never go to that spot where the wall would exist. What he was saying when he said build a wall was giving you a visual. He was putting a visual in your mind. What is the visual saying? The visual is symbolism. It meant that we would, as the United States, with him in charge, we would enforce our borders and we would enforce our laws on immigration. That's what build a wall means. It's a visual image that represents an idea. That's how salespeople talk. Good salespeople do this all the time. A good salesperson tells you that this used Toyota that you're about to buy from 1998 is the best car that you can buy, and it's going to go for 500 miles. It already has 250 miles on it. You're going to get 250,000 miles on it. You're going to get another 250,000 out of it. They're giving you an image in your mind of that car driving to 500 miles on the odometer. Now, is that actually true? Probably not. Is it literally going to drive to 500,000 miles? Probably not. But is the salesperson trying to give you a vision in your mind that will help sell the car? Yes, he is. That's sales, folks. This is how Donald Trump talks. Remember who he is. He's a salesperson. He is not trying to talk to you literally. A lot of times when I'm breaking things down on the show, I break them down to the detail, and I'm speaking very literally. He speaks very directionally. It's just his normal way of talking. If you listen to him talk, he does it all the time. And long story short, this build a wall thing worked because he gave a whole bunch of people an image that he is connected to not letting illegal immigrants into the country, and people extrapolated that into he didn't want any immigrants into the country, which people who dislike him use that against him. I'm giving another example. he got people to using the phrase crooked Hillary, referring to his opponent in the 2016 election, Mrs. Hillary Clinton. And he also had people saying, lock her up, lock her up. Right? Remember that whole thing about crooked Hillary and her email servers and all these things and some illegal things that she may have done, and they were going to lock Hillary Clinton up, this whole thing. And if you remember the debates that happened in 2016, there was that one zinger that Trump delivered to Hillary Clinton. And he said, when I'm president, I'm going to do an investigation and look into your emails and all the things you did. And Hillary said, well, good thing you're not president. And Donald said, well, that's because you be in jail. And that was a kill shot to Hillary Clinton's career when he landed that at that debate. But anyway, the reason that he brought those up, let's think about what happened. You want to get literal here. Let's get literal. Trump won the election in 2016. We know that, right? Now, did Donald Trump try to lock Hillary Clinton up? All right. Did he drag her to court the way that the current administration took Donald Trump to court? No, he didn't do that. He didn't try to lock Hillary Clinton up, even though in his campaign, he labeled her crooked Hillary, even though he had people shouting, lock her up at his events. He didn't actually try to lock her up. So what did he do, though? And why was he saying it if he wasn't actually going to follow through? See, that's what maybe some of his opponents might say. Why didn't he lock her up since he had the crowd chanting, lock her up? What he was doing, understand this, he was planting a visual in your mind. What was the visual he was planting? The visual in your mind that he was planting was that Hillary Clinton has committed some transgressions and you should not forget about them. So the visual of her being crooked means she may be lying and is not trustworthy in some way. And the visual of locking her up meant think about her being in jail. I'm not going to actually try to put her in jail. And he won the election. He could have done it. He didn't do it. He could have tried to put her in jail. He didn't even try. And the reason why it didn't happen is because he was just selling. It was just salesmanship for him. He's like a boxer promoting a fight. All right, that's all he was doing. He was selling you the idea that this person should not be trusted. And those two phrases, lock her up and crooked Hillary, did enough to persuade enough voters for him to win enough electoral votes to win the election. Again, he was planting a visual in your mind, connecting Hillary Clinton to illegal activity. And again, did it work? Recently, again, another one. Trump was quoted, and albeit he was quoted completely out of context, if you saw this clip. He was talking at some rally, and he referenced the Christians who were in the room or who were watching on video. And he said to the Christians that we're going to take care of everything in this next administration when I win, and you will never need to vote again. That's the phrase that people took out of context and started running with it. Donald Trump is saying you're never going to need to vote again. This is proof, everybody, that he is going to become a tyrant and he's going to become a king and he's going to destroy democracy. There'll never be a vote again. Here's him saying, here's proof of him saying you'll never need to vote again. And people were running with this on social media. It only lasted for about 24 hours, as things normally do on here. Now, in context, of course, that's not what he was saying. In the full context, if you listen to the full clip of what he was saying, he was telling the Christians in the audience that I understand that you all don't really participate in the voting process that much. Christians just have a reputation for not voting at all. They don't participate. He was saying to the Christians, I need you to come out and vote this one time. We're going to set things up in a way that serves you, Christians, and you won't need to come vote the next time because we're going to set it up in such a way that this is not going to be on the ballot ever again. These things that you're concerned with. Again, this is taken out of the full context of a full speech that he was giving. That's what he was saying in context. And again, anyone who listened to the context understood this. And people who didn't want to understand it, who already don't like him, were just looking for anything out of context to use as more validation for why they dislike the guy. And again, when you understand this in context, there's nothing to argue with. See, if you listen to this one, and also if you understand that Donald Trump, if he wins in 2024, there is no next election for him. He can't run again. He will have served his 2 terms and it's pretty much over. So he's telling Christians you won't need to vote again. Well, who are they going to vote for? If he wins, they can't vote for him again. He's out of the game. Right? So of course they're not going to be voting for him. So why does he care who they vote for? All right, it doesn't even matter. So again, if you pay attention to this, then it makes perfect sense. And if he loses, he's probably not going to run again. All right. So, and if he wins, he's going to solve all the issues the Christians want fixed. So that was his that was his pitch to the Christians, at least in that segment of the speech. And again, this is a full speech that he gave. And the clip that was going around social media was like less than 30 seconds long. So it makes perfect sense when it's put in proper context. But see, most people don't take Trump in proper context because they are already deranged about him. They already have such negative ideas about him that they don't want the context. They just are looking for more reasons to dislike him. So again, Trump was quoted Another time he was quoted as saying he wanted to give full immunity to all police officers. Now, this one was in proper context as far as what he said. He did say that. I want to give full immunity to all police officers. He did say that. And in context, that's what he said. But the bigger context that people are missing. Again, let me give it to you. The president, first of all, does not have the power to grant immunity to police officers. A president of the United States cannot grant immunity to a police officer unless the police officer is charged with a federal crime. Most police officers are doing their job within the state in which they work, which means the state deals with what kind of immunity a police officer has. Secondly, police officers already have qualified immunity. All right, within the context of doing their jobs, they have a certain amount of immunity based on what they do. So, first of all, Donald Trump can't do the thing that he said. And secondly, police officers already have a certain amount of immunity. So again, the context, this is what people are missing because people don't think, they just react. So there's nothing to get excited about because this can't even happen. And third, here's the visual that he was trying to give you. The visual he was giving you was, as a law-abiding citizen, I'm assuming all of you are law-abiding citizens, you want police to have immunity to do their jobs, to deal with the criminals out there who are not following the laws. You see, I'm a person who is a law-abiding citizen, 42 years of age as of this recording. I don't care if police have immunity because I don't do anything that attracts the attention of police. I don't deal with police. I have no interactions with police, especially not violent ones. If I did interact with a cop, it'll be a conversation and that's all that's going to happen. It's not going to be a violent interaction. I'm not worried about a cop having immunity for anything because the cop's not going to do anything to me because I'm not going to do anything that leads the cop to needing to do something. And most law-abiding citizens think this way, or they understand this even if they couldn't articulate it. So what are you worried about a cop having immunity for? Are you saying, well, cops can go around killing black people? Okay, find out the actual data on how many black people, unarmed and nonviolent, get killed by cops every year. It's a very small amount, much fewer than most people think. But people, again, have been taught to be reactive to these things and get emotional without thinking. And I've told you, 3 secrets about human beings. Most people don't think, they don't read, and they're lazy. So they're easily persuaded by nonsense. Just make sure you're not one of them. Because I'm not trying to change this because I can't change the world. I can change some people, not the whole world. So if you're a person who doesn't do anything to attract the attention of police, especially on a violent level where a police officer feels like threatened or feels like they have to use violence or some type of physical force against you, you have nothing to worry about. That's the way I look at it. What do you have to worry about if you're not doing anything to cause a police officer to even consider physical force? Why are you worried about a cop being immune? Immune to what? What are you going to do? Immune to talking to you? Even if you decided to take it in the worst possible way, again, the president doesn't have the power. So this shows a lack of critical thinking that people have. Most people are so far away from critical thinking, they don't even know what it is. And also lack of understanding how the government works. The president can't even do that. But again, people take these things out of context to get excited. Point number 3, today's topic, once again, is why people lose their damn minds over Donald Trump. Number 3, most people are not critical thinkers, as I just said. And because of this, they are easily misled by their emotional trigger points. So any emotional trigger point that can get you excited can send you in any direction that it wants to send you on, chasing after a red herring, just because you don't have the critical thinking skills to balance out your emotions. See, every human being has emotions. I have emotions as well and emotional trigger points as well. But because I'm a critical thinker, my critical thinking balances out those emotional triggers. So anything that could possibly trigger me emotionally, my critical thinking balances it out and cancels out the emotional reaction before it becomes a reaction, before it turns into actual action. There are many emotional trigger points around Donald Trump. Let's name a few of them. Racism is one, misogyny is another, xenophobia is another, and whatever other ones have come up, I don't know, love for the police, law and order, whatever you want to call that, have come up. And even since between the time that I record this and the time that you hear it, it's probably something new that popped up. And there will be more coming. Again, after this episode comes out, after you hear it, something else is going to come up between now and at least election day. And if he wins, even more is going to come out. You got 4 more years of stuff coming out. Most human beings are much more driven by their emotions than they are by their logic. And most people do not engage their logic hardly at all when it comes to making decisions, thinking, or reasoning. Most people don't do much thinking or reasoning. And most people are slow to make decisions unless the decision is triggered by some type of emotion. Most people don't make logical, critical thinking decisions. They make emotional decisions. And thinking, most people don't do at all. Reasoning, most people don't do at all. They wouldn't even know what it was if they saw it. Everything for most human beings is based on emotion. And then they come up with logical justification for those emotional decisions, even if their logic makes no sense. And they completely ignore that their emotions made the choice, and they insist that everything was thought out logically. Because again, most people would never admit to their own ignorance, even though most people have like high levels of ignorance. Everybody has high levels of ignorance, even me. But as long as you're aware of your ignorance, you can curtail it and keep it from running you off the road. Most people don't have the humility to admit that. So if everything you believe about Donald Trump was thought out logically, then I wouldn't even need to record this episode because all of you would already be thinking everything that I just said. And you would already be saying it, so I wouldn't need to say it. But because nobody's saying it, I've needed to say it. All human beings, once we make a decision based on emotions, we are highly unlikely to ever change that decision. So I want to be clear that I did not record this episode hoping to change your mind about Donald Trump. I would bet most of you who are listening to this already have an opinion, already have made some decisions about how you feel about the guy. Maybe you were entertained by this, maybe you were annoyed and angered by it, but I want to make sure you understand I did not record this with hopes of changing your mind, changing the way that you think. I'm hoping to just open your mind in such a way that maybe you can allow some more critical and rational and logical thought to enter, whether the subject is Donald Trump or anything else. That's the aim of this episode. So once we make an emotional decision for all human beings, all of us, our ego gets involved in defending that decision regardless of information, perspectives, and experiences that are presented to us. Most people do not change their minds once their ego is engaged in defending the decision. So if you are already unhinged about Donald Trump, especially on the negative side, the anti-Donald Trump side, nothing I said here today is going to change your mind. And again, that was not the point. I'm not in the business of changing people's minds. That's a terrible business to be in. Any of you who's in the business of changing people's minds, I would suggest you get out of that business because it's a failing business to be in. I talked about this in episode 1669. You are not in the business of changing minds. If you're trying to change people's minds, you will go out of business very quickly. I do want to make sure that I'm on the record, however, saying the things that I'm saying, just in case there is some potential within maybe 1% of you who's listening to this to possibly think a little bit differently than the way you were thinking before you heard this. All right, that's the aim of me saying it, to possibly open the minds of someone who is open-minded, and to make sure that I'm on the record with all the things that I'm saying, so that if and when I say any of these things in the future, I can tell people, hey, this is not my first time saying it. I'm on the record. You can go listen to an episode of Work on Your Game Masterclass where I said that already. So let me recap this class, which is why people lose their damn minds over Donald Trump. Everybody knows who Donald Trump is. This episode doesn't really need too much of an introduction. Point number, I'm just looking at my notes here. Point number 1, he does not follow rules and conventions. He basically has skipped steps, jumped up the ladder. He took the elevator instead of climbing the ladder up to the top, as most people do. And most people don't like when they see someone else do that and do so successfully, because it causes you to question yourself. But instead of actually questioning yourself, what most people revert to doing is throwing some negative attention or negative projection onto the person who did what they didn't do. Point number 2, he's a salesman who speaks directionally and not literally. When you like somebody, you listen to them and understand them directionally. You get the point and the spirit of what they're trying to say, even if they're not good at saying it. When you dislike someone, you take everything that they say, you dissect it literally and try to hold their words against them, the same way that a lawyer on trial would try to cross-examine a witness and try to make them look stupid on the stand. That's what people try to do with Donald Trump. They try to interpret everything he says literally and use it against him, as opposed to understanding him directionally, which is what you do when you have empathy and compassion and love for another person. Most people have the opposite of that for Trump, which is why they interpret him literally. Number 3, most people are not critical thinkers, and they are easily misled by their emotional trigger points. In other words, if someone is already emotional on a subject, they get their ego involved and they are not changing their minds. They will come up with any logical, or at least to them logical, justification for any idea or belief that they have, even if it is not really based in any type of reason, logic, or critical thinking. And this is what happens whenever people are emotionalized on a subject. Their minds are not changing, and they are easily manipulated and easily led even further down the path that they're already going on. I would suggest that, being that you're human and you do have emotion and you do have ego, is that you step up your critical thinking skills to balance out that emotion and that ego, because that emotion and ego will drive you into a wall or up the wall if you are not paying attention and you are not in control of those impulses, because they are human, they are real, they do exist. All that said, make sure you go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. You want to learn how to think critically, how to put your message out there, put your idea out there, sell yourself. Maybe you want to skip some steps and take the elevator rather than climbing a ladder up the building to get to where you want to go to. I'm looking for people who are ambitious in that way. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre, all